Hello, everyone. Welcome to MLGdańsk group online meeting. Today, our guests are Rajiv and Andrew from Hugging Face, and that's our pleasure to host you here. And yeah, happy to learn what you've got, and we'll be listening really carefully to your presentation. And over to you, Rajiv.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, everyone. Pleasure to meet you all. So I'll kick things off here. I'm Andrew, one of the account executives here at Hugging Face. Sounds like you're all pretty familiar with us, but I'll give a quick intro to the organization and what we're doing on the open source side, as well as try and give you a very quick overview of some of the things we're doing commercially as well. In case they're relevant for you in the future, you'll just have that information, and not everyone's always aware of that. I am traveling on a train right now, so I'll keep my video off, but Raj will be doing the majority of the session today, so hopefully that won't be an issue. So just kicking off in terms of Hugging Face, high level on our organization is the mission we have is to democratize access to machine learning. When we say machine learning and good machine learning, what we really refer to there is transformer and diffuser architecture models. That's what we're trying to democratize access to. And a challenge that we see in the market really is that whilst people are quite aware of this technology and the incredible benefits you can get from using this state-of-the-art machine learning, most organizations are really not leveraging it at all. Or the larger ones that are starting to use it are certainly not leveraging it in as many ways as they could be. And we see two main reasons for that problem. The first one is just a lack of understanding of how to use the technology and when to use it. And then the second one is around having access to the right tools to be able to use this technology. Because there's been this paradigm shift to transfer learning and foundational models, there's a new tool set that is required to be able to share and collaborate on this machine learning technology. And so that's one of the challenges that we're trying to address as well. And we're addressing these two challenges in two principal ways. The first one is on the open source side of our business, which is what we're most well known for. And then we do also have some commercial offerings that kind of enhance what we're doing on the open source side of our business. So just to give you a quick summary of what we're doing on the open source side, and you'll probably know most of this, but maybe not all of it. So firstly, we put out a bunch of free education on how to use transformers, diffusers, reinforcement learning, and just many, many other free courses that you can check out to try and address that knowledge gap. Then we also have a range of free libraries. Transformers is the most popular by far. That's, I think I'm right in saying, the most popular open source machine learning project of all time. So extremely popular. We have a range of other libraries which are less well known. So diffusers, which is equivalent to the Transformers library, but for diffuser architecture models. And then things like Accelerate and Optimum and Evaluate. So if you're doing distributed training of models, if you're trying to optimize models for particular hardware sets, if you're trying to evaluate models for particular tasks, there's a few different libraries you can be looking into and using. And then on top of our success with those libraries, we became incredibly popular, developed this huge community with millions and millions of users. And that enabled us to create the Hugging Face Hub, which is our open source model and dataset repository. Think of it as the equivalent of GitHub for machine learning. So there's functionality there that helps you collaborate on models, share models, also train, deploy, and demo models as well. Most of that functionality is free, and there is some kind of premium parts to it. And that is growing insanely quickly. Like it started off at 10,000 models at the beginning of last year. Now it's, I think, close to 130,000 models. So really exponential growth with that. So that's what we're doing on the open source side, which is a nice segue into what we're doing on the commercial side. So, Raj, if we can go to the next page. Yeah, so in terms of our enterprise offerings, there's two main things to be aware of. So the first is the Enterprise Hub. This is basically the same as the Community Hub, which you can access at hub.co. The main difference, if you're large and you want to use our model sharing and collaboration functionality, there's probably some barriers that would prevent you from using the Community Hub. Things like security, deployment options, and just enterprise support. And so we have some enterprise versions of the hub that address those issues, have some different security features, have some different deployment options. And that is something you can use if you're a large organization to share and collaborate on machine learning. So that's the first one. And then the other is just expert services. So because we have lots of machine research is all researching the effect in cutting edges of ML. Also, knowledge, your expert service. So the different figures of that. The advice is kind of like having Hugging Face on the to help you with your project. So if you build something, you need doing that. This advise you on how to architecture, to do training of large models, or production inference, reduce latency, improve do this and stuff.
Hello, can you hear you actually?
What we're doing. I'll pass it over to Raj now, who can jump into the workshop and give you more information on transformers.
We have an audio quality issue, so I didn't hear it last minute. I don't know if others probably too, but can you switch camera off? Maybe this will increase the bandwidth for audio a little.
Raj, I think you're on mute if you're talking. I can't hear you. Yeah, so I'll hand things over to Raj now. Hopefully he has a better audio connection. But if there is interest in learning more about any of the commercial offerings we have for the Enterprise Hub or any of our expert services, please don't hesitate to reach out and get in contact with us.
All right. So how many people already have some type of background or have worked with transformers a little bit? You can just put yes if you have in the chat or no if you haven't. That way, I just want to get a sense of the audience here like this. Adam, did you say something? Did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
No, rising hand means yes, and maybe there is a count.
Okay. 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 Excellent. Okay, so I see a bunch of yeses here. And then I assume the others are too quiet or no. So this is our time. So feel free as we go through this to push me if I'm going, too easy for you. I wasn't sure on the background, so I have a little bit of intro, and then we'll get a little bit meatier into the notebook as well in terms of examples and demos as we go through this. The notebook, I put the link in the chat that I'm going to use. So it's a Colab notebook. Hopefully all of you can fire it up and use it. My suggestion is grab it right away. If you're not used to Colab, go and connect to the resources and then just hit the runtime, run all. And that's just because there's a bunch of models that I use in this notebook. So if you just hit run all now, all that stuff will get loaded and be ready to go when we want to try it. And it'll be more interactive then. So, and try the notebook if you can. It'll make it a lot more enjoyable rather than just watching me the whole time as well. Please give me feedback during this. Really what I want to do today is talk about transformers. And just for background, I'm at Hugging Face. I spend most of my time talking to enterprises about how they're using transformers. So I'll bring in a lot of use cases I know from that. I also enjoy making content. So you'll see me over on the YouTube at Logistics, on TikTok, Instagram as well, making data science content. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of methods and data science and how they fit in. We'll talk about some use cases that are common that I see. And then finally, we'll do a little bit of coding, hands-on piece like that. Now, stepping back, as data scientists, we all spend time analyzing data. And a lot of times we analyze data, that's good enough, right? We understand what happened in the past, we can use those lessons. Sometimes what we want to do is actually learn from the past, but then make predictions that are going forward. And that's where we jump into machine learning, where, right, if I'm looking at houses in Chicago, if I know the square footage of a house, I can get a price, even if I haven't seen the house before. Right? Very traditional machine learning for all of you folks. You know, right? It takes a long time to do all this. You have to prep the data, get it labeled, spend time feature engineering. That's where a lot of the creativity comes into play. Training the model, and then you test the prediction. And if you go to the next problem, like I want to do the next city over, you have to go through all of that again. So the traditional kind of machine learning, working with XGBoost, all of that can be exhausting. Every team I meet, no one can get enough work done fast enough. And there's 4 common limitations that I see. One is we end up using very tabular features to describe the world. We don't work directly with unstructured data often. We're focused on predicting a number or category, right? It's a regression problem, it's a classification problem, and that's the way we kind of use machine learning traditionally. It's a long life cycle to prediction. By the time somebody gives you a data set, getting all the way through to giving them a final model for predictions that they can deploy, right? That cycle is typically kind of weeks or months for the most part. And then if we change the task again, we have to go get a new model. So this is hopefully kind of the exhausting stuff most of you have seen and dealt with. And this is where, I think AI is evolving. And what we can do is using large data sets, using new algorithms, using GPUs, we have a whole new way to attack these problems. And this is where transformers comes in. Spend time on the architecture, but at the essence of it, and what I want to talk about today, is having pre-trained models, right? Models that already have been trained on different data that we can just pick up and apply. Models that work across lots of different types of data. So we're not just limited to working with tabular, but audio, video, code, lots of different ways to work with it. And finally, our objectives. We're not limited to just predicting a category or a number. We can also use generative AI, generative outputs as well as part of these models. There's fine-tuning of the models where we start bringing our own data and changing the pre-trained. We can talk a little bit about it. My notebook covers it, depending on if there's desire to get there as well. Now, typically I go over, I like to show you can all follow along at this portion, is show people what are the different types of pre-trained models that are out there. So if you go to the Hugging Face website, I just typed in, I'll put the URL here just to make it easy for everybody. I like this page because it summarizes all the different things that we can do with transformers that are just ready for us off the shelf, whether it's working in computer vision, natural language processing, audio, tabular, multimodal. All of these are tasks where we've built out specific pages that help explain the task if you're new to this and give you models. And I like to think of these tasks as little building blocks when we have a project, right? When we need to build an application for human resources, or we need to find some way to reduce the churn in our company. Often as we think through these projects, maybe there's something working with documents, or maybe there's something with audio or images. This is where understanding where all these tasks that are already existing come into play, because if I, for example, need to do some type of automatic speech recognition, this page tells me all about it. What is the typical input? What is the output? Right? Videos about this, potential use cases, code snippets as well. And then, right, I can even try this right here. I can see how it sounds right here, and it's going to work. Is it recording right now? Let's see. Now I got it recording. I had to get the button red. Let's see how well it does. And then we'll go ahead and compute that. Oh, malformed sound file. Let me try it one more time. I don't know if it's... All right, let's see if this works now. I'm hoping it does, because typically it does. There must be something down about it, or it could be the web interface. Either way, typically it works. But what I like to do is there's different models here, different data sets, and we can click into these models. So if you want to use this, right, this works for you. You want to be able to use this within your company. We can come here. We can see what license the model is. We can see here it's Apache 2.0. I can use that safely inside my company. I can read the abstract, see how to use it, get a code snippet as well for this. If I want to actually download it, I can go over to, thank you, Martin. I can go over to the files, download this model as well. So let me do one other example, just to kind of show this off a little bit more. I like the images. I'm going to go to image segmentation. So here is, right, this is image segmentation. It takes an input of an image, and then you can see what the output is by pixel. We can do that. Training a model like this would take a lot of work, especially if you needed this. But you know what? There's already an existing models right off the shelf that kind of work to do this type of thing. You can see here, right? It segments it, figures out even where the ball is for this. And if I can read about the model, if I want to use it, and we'll switch to code here in a little bit, a couple lines of code to be able to use it. So this is often like a starting point I like to point people to, is coming to the tasks page. If you're not sure about tasks, what are the best models? Hugging Face spend some time curating it. A lot of this text here that's written is by folks that are helping out the open source. So there's lots of volunteers that are the ones submitting the pull requests, making the documentation as well for this. Okay. How is this tracking? Is this tasks kind of useful to know? Is this, am I being too repetitive here? Let me know what's going on with this. I'm hoping I'm teaching you at least something new here. So let's keep going on from the tasks. And please, if I speak too fast or if you need me to repeat something, ask me to. So that gives you some ideas of some kind of quick tasks. Let's talk about some use cases. Oh, good. Thank you. Let's talk about some use cases that I often see, when we work with companies. What are the ones that often come up? And then we'll talk about how we can solve them. I could speak even faster. When I do this type of like public speaking, I always like speak slow. I don't know why. I just get into the rhythm. Like when I make videos, I have to speak fast because no one will listen to a slow video. You can't 1.5 now. So let's talk a little bit about searching. So this top query is something that I have teenage kids. This is kind of my daughter. I'll see her type in something like this. And for somebody that grew up where searching technology was a lot earlier, right, 10, 15 years ago, seeing a query like this kind of really throws me off. I really almost have to lecture her on this because, like, why would you use an abbreviation like Xmas? Like, you're going to just limit yourself to a subset of information. Or, if you're searching, you say eat better, but what do you mean by eat better? Is this about getting stronger? Is it about losing weight? Is it about eating a variety of foods? Like, you should be more precise, in your writing is something I would lecture to her. But the reality is modern search engines nowadays, you can put things like this in and you'll still get back good results. the modern search engines know that, for example, that if I type in Xmas holidays, that's really related to Christmas, or that eat better is the same concept as healthy. Now, the way these engines, of course, are doing this is they're taking all the text that we're bringing in, they're passing it through these pre-trained models, getting embeddings, numerical representations. Then these numerical representations, we can literally, if we want to visualize them, we can. But these numerical representations end up having similar concepts close together. So even though the words are spelled differently, even though they're entirely two different words, if people are using them in the same way, they're going to end up in the same area here as well. And so this is what's called semantic search. It allows us to be able to say something like eat better and get back the healthy document as well. This is huge. I see this a lot for creating embeddings, whether it's for searches, which especially with ChatGPT is everybody's talking about how to search enterprise data, but that semantic search comes into play there. Comes into play when we're thinking about recommender systems as well, because there's so much information, so many varied types of behavior, often gets very high cardinality, lots of categoricals, that using something like an embeddings can bring that down into a smaller space that's more effective for using whether recommenders or search as well. The other very exciting use case I see in many different ways is autocomplete. So one of them is this code generation that we see with GitHub Copilot. Now there's a number of other similar technologies that are out there. But the idea here that we can just give the computer a little bit of text and it finishes is pretty powerful. And we see this for code where we can type in exactly what we want and we'll get the code that we need. This has been very powerful. Folks, even at like places like, oh, do I have an example? No. There's a study, Google did a study internally that found that people that were using their autocomplete were much more productive developers. Google's also pointed out that a sizable base of their code base now has been based on autocomplete. So I think this is a technology that we see is gaining quite wide approval with developers. But if you're a company, you might have your own code base where you want to customize one of these tools to it. And so that's something that I see is there. The other piece is this is auto-completing code, but we can do text as well. So this is a video from Jasper, which is one of the many generative AI startups where we can give it a text for what we want to explain, and it's going to then just write the story for us. So this is about aliens and the voice of Joe Rogan, but we can see here it quickly kind of writes it out. The human then can collaborate, work together with it, and be able to then create that final output. And I see lots of companies actually deploying, putting this into place, especially areas where they have to do lots of writing, like copywriting, using the machine in combination with the man, getting to be very, very common. And of course, right, we see this with ChatGPT, right? And some of us already know, right? These technologies have been around for a while. We know that these models, if we've trained these models, the output word after word after word in that. The generative AI technologies, really, we know this last 6 months have gotten a lot bigger than that. We've seen all the work for how we can take in text and then be able to get out images as well. Very useful for creative, for marketing, but some of you might be like, I work for an old-fashioned enterprise. Like we don't do image stuff like this. How would this be relevant? Well, one area that I see is in what I call document AI. So working with lots of documents and being able to use and bring that same analysis of the image of a document, of the text of a document, to be able to do things like answer a question. So in this case, we're bringing the image of the PDF. We're not even OCRing it, just the image itself, and asking a question. And the models nowadays, it's called visual question answering, will respond back with an answer. And I'll put up a demo of this at the end. It's all something that you can all build nowadays, but this is kind of that cutting edge of taking all the great stuff that we have with images and text and bringing it into kind of an understanding that's often useful for enterprises as well. So let's switch from the use cases. Let's make sure we go code a little bit with it. We're going to use transformers, which Andrew mentioned, right? One of the leading libraries out there in machine learning. It's made to be very easy to use, which is why it's so popular. But you can also peel away that easy to use and get really complex with it. And that's also why the advanced folks like it, is because it does abstract away the complexity. But if you want the complexity, if you need the nuance, if you need lots of options, it does that as well. Okay, let me pause here and see if there's any questions, anything, clarifications I can do before going into the notebook.
I think so far so good, but in case of questions, please, guys, either type message or type in the chat box or speak.
Yeah, and exactly, please. I want to make sure this is useful for all of you, not just future YouTubers out there as well. I've given you the link for the notebook. Hopefully some of you have got the notebook up and running. The notebook is actually pretty exhaustive in terms of it contains lots of resources, lots of code examples, much more than I'm going to continue today. So it's very useful. I would suggest grabbing the notebook. If you use Colab all the time, just make a duplicate of it. So that way you can change it, make notes yourself, and have your own version of this as well. I've linked many of the sources that I like in the beginning. So there's the official Transformers notebook. Julian Simon has a whole set of notebooks going through AWS, solving a problem using Transformers. For the advanced folks, I don't know how many of folks know about Niels Roge, but he has, I need to update that. I got the wrong thing on there. He has his own GitHub here. I need to fix that right here. You're going to see. Niels is one of the open source contributors or folks that work on the open source as a machine learning engineer at Hugging Face. And he spends a lot of time taking all these models that you're seeing and putting them into the Transformers package. And he's worked on a lot of models over the years. But as he does this, he takes the time to write out careful notebooks on exactly how he's working with them. So you can see here is just a random one I grabbed on using Table Transformer for this. So some of these notebooks don't make it out into the public tutorials and stuff, but a lot of these notebooks are really good, especially because he'll go into kind of various details on like what's like one of these, like look at the layout LM2, which is a very popular one for document AI. You can see he has many different data sets he's actually run the notebooks at. So it's a good, for those of you kind of a little bit more advanced and want some kind of meatier ones like that, his notebooks are good. And I'm going to fix my, there we go. See, we can fix the stuff live. All right. You got the notebook running. In the beginning, it just loads up the typical packages that we use. I also, at the upfront, load all the different models just so it's a little more interactive as I go through this as well. So just like the tasks that I showed you earlier in the web page, there's a similar concept with the Transformers package called pipelines. And we already have preset pipelines for a lot of those tasks that I showed you, where I can just tell it, I want, for example, the sentiment analysis pipeline. And when it does that, you can read it. It says no model was applied. So it defaults to another model. If you're curious about that model, you can just click here. And in this case, right, it's a Dilbert base, sun case, blah, blah, blah model, but I can go and read this. So this is one of the nice things about the Transformers packages. For a lot of the common tasks, the Hugging Face folks will already have tested out and figured out like what's a good default model for this particular task. And so then I can just send some tests too. Oh, well, let's change this to I'm happy about today because I'm on the call here. Look at that. And we can do that. Now, for those who haven't seen how to do this the old-fashioned way, if you broke out Scikit and you had to do this with text and bag of words, would take you, 20, 30 lines of code that you would have to write to do this. This is why transformers are so popular, is because now I can take all that code that I would have had to write before, in 2 or 3 lines of code, be able to solve the same problem as well. But it's not only this, right? This was sentiment analysis. Let's look at some of the other pipelines. So here is a text generation pipeline. And I'll go ahead and run it here. And this is right in the classic once upon a time, and have it start to write a story here, once upon a time, and you can see the story. And sometimes I do these where everybody competes to see who can make the funniest one like this as well. But you can do this for once upon a time. You can see this right in this course if you know how to. So this is GPT-2, the model that it's being used here. So at this point, right, if you go to OpenAI site, they have GPT-3 and 3.5 that they're using. So this is the older version that they open sourced. But for some basic text generation like this, it's a lot of fun to kind of play around with because it's much lighter weight and easier to use like that. So not only that, if you want to work with images, just as easy. So here's my little fat cat. I'll show you what the picture is of our little friend that we're going to work with here today. So that's our little, I don't know, I call it a fat cat, but it's probably some sophisticated animal. But I can take one of the pre-trained models that we have out there, be able to then classify the type of image. So in this case, I can see, right, it's a lynx is the class, right, the category that came up the highest probability here. But this is just remarkable that I can go grab a pre-trained model, and right, I can see here it's the Google's Vision Transformer, and just use this with, again, a few lines of code to do this. So it becomes, right, really brings the barrier down to kind of start using these. Then here's my fun one. We can even do visual question answering. We've added pipelines for this. So take this cat here. Now these multimodal models let us ask questions about this. So I think that the first example I have here is, what is the weather like that I asked it? And it sees in the picture, hey, there's a snowy, cold, or kind of the top 2 answers like that. If you have other interesting questions, we can ask it. I think I have one other one that I have highlighted here that I've used in the past, like this, like what color are the bushes? I'm not very creative. But you get the sense of how easy it is to be able to take an image ready off the shelf and be able to pass it to a model like this to be able to, start doing very sophisticated things like visual question answering. All right. Let me pause here. I also I need to do a time check too. Like, how long am I supposed to go? I can go forever.
So really, it's up to 1 hour is more than
okay.
Great.
Okay.
So
okay.
Still some time, no worries.
Okay. Is this good? Should I keep going with the code? Do people want me to talk about other things? Do we have issues with something that we want to drill into? Feel free to kind of bring up other topics outside of this too. Okay. So I know some of you already worked with transformers. So I think one of the things I have in the notebook is I have a little bit more sophisticated pieces here. So a common thing we often want to do is use embeddings. So I went ahead and added, I added in, like, suppose you want to take a sentence and create an embedding for that. Like you're building your own semantic search or you're doing something with a recommender system. So I put in examples for both image and text, how to get embeddings. So that way you get a sense of how to do that. Right? I could spend a whole hour just talking about embeddings in the different ways, but at least gives people a little bit of flavor of how we turn different, text into embeddings as well. let's see. I'm trying to remember what I have next in the slides. Let's talk this through the slides a little bit, and then we'll come back to the notebook. So one thing that often comes up with any of these models is what are the concerns, risks to this? And so I just want to spend a few minutes on this. One is any of these models that are pre-trained off historical data suffer from the same bias issues we have to always deal with in models, where the world that we've trained the model on in the past might be very different than the world that we want to live in. Right. So this is the simple example of I type in scientist and all the representations, for example, are kind of male, that type of bias there. So always something to be considering when you're kind of working with these models. The other thing is explainability. Right? If you come from the traditional tabular world, we have a pretty good tool set for getting to understand what's going on in the models, from very interpretable models to tools like SHAP that help me understand what's going on in XGBoost. We do have some explainability tools for these large language models, for these transformer models, but these models, partly because they work in this very high dimensional space of text, but they're also very large. There's so many things going on. I don't feel like they're very good at explaining. It's not in the same kind of, it's at a very different level than traditional tools and requirements that we might have for explainability and interpretability. I think that's always one of the sore spots when we're working with these types of models. I have to bring out. There are tools for doing explainability. Like I have, videos talking about that, but again, it's something to be aware of. All right. We have a few more minutes. Let me talk really quickly about how you modify these pre-trained models, because I think that often comes up as I have that model, but that's great. You showed me the English only model, Raj. Like I need it in Polish. Like that doesn't work for me. And so this is where what we want to do is modify that model. I work with a lot of financial customers. So the word market, for example, means something very different in English for where it can be a place where people can go shop, but it can also be where commercial deals occur. Similarly, in English, the word bond could be a monetary kind of instrument, currency instrument of bond. It could be a chemical bond. It could be a romantic bond. So this is where, when I explain to people that, yes, you can get the pre-trained model off the shelf, but you know what? It might be best for your use case to spend a little bit of time fine-tuning it for your case. And if we look at a model like BERT, it was trained on Wikipedia and the books corpus. So that's the vocabulary, that's what it knows. And if you want doing something like, hey, I want to do stock price sentiment. Well, stock price sentiment data, is going to be a very task-specific data. But what we can do is work with these models, and there's different ways to do it, but essentially we're going to just retrain a small portion of the model. And this is often transfer learning is often the kind of the larger word that it goes under. Transfer learning, hopefully everybody's pretty much aware of it now in machine learning. It's an easy way to get an improvement when you're working with these models, simply because if we can learn something, from the past, we can build upon that with transfer learning. I didn't say that the best, but so here I'll show you a model that I have here in the notebook as an example, where the goal is the stock sentiment, being able to take a sentence like this here and say, is it positive? Is it neutral? Is it negative? But not happy, sad, but this is like how the stock is going to move like this. And this is a very real use case. I've worked with, a number of companies, building similar models like this as well. And so in this case, I'll show you here in the notebook is you start with not a regular BERT model. It's actually a FinBERT model. It's a financial BERT model, a BERT model that was trained on all financial type vocabulary. But then we can retrain it for this specific task of this classification problem as well. All right. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody kind of in that way. And if you go in the notebook here, you'll see this is where I've spent a big chunk of the notebook here. Goes through, you can see like fine tuning a model where this is the final model after we fine tuned it, where let's see, let me show you the models in the data set. So this is the data set that it uses. The data set is on the Hugging Face Hub, right? The Hugging Face Hub has lots of models and data sets. It's a data set that's here. This is the model after I fine-tuned it. That's available here. And if we go through the notebook here, just want to give you a sense of like what it would take to kind of fine-tune it. If you're not familiar with it, is you would start by loading the data set in. So this is the financial phrase bank data set. A couple lines, I'd split the data set, do my usual test train. But then the next step is get the pre-trained model. So we talked about kind of using an existing model to start that fine-tuning with. So this is just a couple of lines to get that pre-trained. It's very similar to what we were doing with the pipeline. I'm going to then tokenize the data that I have. So this is converting all the text data that is going in the input, converting it into numbers so my model can handle that. And then it's setting up my evaluation criteria. What's my metric? Is it F1? Is it accuracy? Is it log? Like what is my metric that I'm going to use here? How am I going to compute that out? Those are all the prerequisites. Then it's simply, and ignore the error here. It's just because I didn't log into the hub, so it got mad at me. But that's really all you need to do. And then you can use the trainer that's in the Hugging Face library and tell it exactly kind of what arguments you want, like, you know, how many epochs you want. I just have one here for doing that. And, you know, this is only a small section of the arguments. You can see here, there's a lot more arguments that are available for kind of the more sophisticated folks as well once you get into this. But just to give you a sense that if you need to fine tune these models, it's a very doable task. People do it all the time. If you're looking for more on how to do this, there is the Hugging Face course here. Walks you through using the Hugging Face library as well. Now, though, I am curious, where is the GitHub link for the course? What would Polish? Is there Polish? I don't know. Oh, wait, here. This is easier for me. Oh, see, look, we're not missing. We've got other languages, but I don't see Polish there. So now you guys have a project. If you have any folks that want to spend time translating the Transformers course, you can do that. You can see there's many works in progress for other languages that are going on as well for this. Okay. I can show some other cool things, but again, feel free to kind of ask questions as I'm going through this. The last thing I like to highlight is the spaces area up here. So this is where there's lots of web demos. And in the notebook here, if you go down here on web demos on spaces, I've put in some of my favorite spaces to show off. And so these are kind of, again, more enterprise focused. Let's look at two of these just to give you an idea of what's possible as well. So this one here is a Wikipedia, like why is the sky blue? So this is an example of a question answer system. And I get this, why is the sky blue? But I get this nice paragraph here for the response. And if I scroll down here, I can see what it's actually doing is it's going to Wikipedia, finding that, hey, there's actually 3 or 4 different relevant paragraphs or entries in Wikipedia that have information. And then it's taking that and then generating the final paragraph here for the answer. So it's a pretty sophisticated operation it's doing. But the great thing is all these examples I'm going to show you, if you want to go and see what's going on, you can go and look at them, at the code for doing this. This is my other favorite one here is this document info, where this is that example I showed earlier where we have the invoice. We can ask it a question. So I can ask it, who signed the invoice? Submit that question in and see, and it recognizes that John Smith is the one that signed us. And again, the great thing is yes, you can use this, but even better for all of you developer types, click over into files and versions. You can go through and say, hey, what exactly are they doing? How are they building this here? And kind of replicate it for yourselves as well. So the spaces here is a public space that anybody, and you all can as well, create your own web apps to be able to do it. To create a new space, all you do is go hit new space. If you're using Streamlit or Gradio, there's easy templates already built for you. If you want to even upload your own container, you can. So this is kind of a public service that Hugging Face does. If you want to have a commercial space, if you want to use a GPU, if you want to use a GPU, there's a pricing for kind of using GPUs on the spaces as well. So, and this is where Andrew was talking earlier is we have two basic enterprise products. One is services where, folks like us, me, come and help you think through problems. The other is we have an enterprise version of this where if you're working within a large organization, you want all the same kind of functionality. You don't want to be on the public internet. That's where that spaces come in as well. Does that help, Marcin, answer that? Exactly. Oh, yeah. This is where you want to check, because all the latest demos are here for all the latest technologies. Like this one is the instruct pics to pics, where you can then take a picture. Let's see. Oh, does there no examples? Oh, here, load example. This is like the latest in the generative, where you can actually change the text. And when you type in and change the text, the image changes as well. But all the machine learning papers nowadays, the ones that go to NeurIPS and ICML and all those, they often will place demos of their papers on spaces as well. So if you follow Hugging Face on the Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll see lots of links and references to them. But otherwise, even if you just check this once in a while, you'll be able to see all the spaces. So like DALL-E Mini, remember when that was big like 6 months ago? That was on the Hugging Face spaces. Oh, I picked a one that takes forever to load like this. So Adam asked about the wiki in English. So what I was mentioning here in this was what the BERT model. Oh, where's my slide? This is what the original BERT model was trained on. It's called Books Corpus. I think it's available. Available for kind of free or whatever online, and it's commonly used to kind of train the language models as well. Does that answer that, Adam? Let me know if I missed that as well. If you're really interested in training, the Bloom project that Hugging Face did, where we built kind of a 178 billion parameter model, we trained off a terabyte of data. The Bloom project has listed out all the different data sets it used for creating that, and it used like something like 38 languages. So if you're interested in those data sets, just let me know or look up the Bloom project, and that will also link you to lots of great data for kind of doing pre-training for models. Okay. All right, 5 minutes left. What else can I answer? Anything people wanted to see or that I didn't show? Like, hey, like I want to do something.
Yeah, so you described a lot about the publicly available models. Do you have also some API exposed to public that could be used by community as open source?
As in like our own private models, or as in like hosting models?
As in private models.
Yeah, so Hugging Face is really focused on the open source movement and democratization. So we focus a lot on open source models and have those out there and available. Now, if you as an organization, for example, or you want to make your models private, you can. So I have like a, like a demo org I often show people that takes the models, and I can, make models, and you can see I can make them private. But really, Hugging Face is all about trying to encourage people to share their models and get them out there. So we don't have like specific BERT models that are better, that are, that are private, that we just keep for ourselves. Our philosophy is that the world is changing so fast, and you can build a very good model, but the open source movement is moving, and it's going to build something a lot better than your model in the next month or two. So it's very hard to stay ahead of that. So this is where, if you go to the models page, 130,000 models, right? It's just an insane amount of models. Yes. And if you type in, a word, you'll see there's so many models on that specific, and they're constantly improving and getting better as well.
I have a slightly different question. So, so there was a buzz in the news a few weeks ago that some people can digest proprietary images which has been trained for stable diffusion. And
yes,
this is probably similar with ChatGPT and all of these. It's very hard to control this massive data. Is not copyrighted. So do you think there could be some so for instance, you are hosting these models, you are also make them available, some of them. So do you think there may be some implications if someone sue the one who trained it, who could implicate also your company?
So okay, yes. So let me just back up, make sure everybody's on the same page. I think one of the things that's happened with stable diffusion and the image generation is we're finding out that the data set that they used had lots of copyright material. So for example, Getty Images, that takes all the pictures, that license them out, like their pictures are in there verbatim like that. And they've also figured out there's ways to tweak the model outputs so you can literally get back that training material. So, even if there's illegal stuff that was trained, you can still get that back out, which, of course, if you're somebody like Getty Images that sells images, or you're an artist that has your own type, is very concerning. So, I mean, there's going to be legal battles over that. One of the things Hugging Face has started focusing on is, can we build data sets where everybody has agreed to share their data, where the contributors know that their data is going to be used like this and have accepted it. So one project we've done this is for the code generation, like completing Python code, where we've created this is the Big Code project. Let me go to for the Big Code project, that what they did was when they collected the code for that, the Python code, they only used code that was available. And sorry, I'm thinking when I'm talking. They all the code they used, they made sure the license matched that it could be used for building a model. They also built tools where you can go in, type in your code and see, does it actually show up in the training data set? They've also put a tool in here where you can also go and see, hey, is my code in the training data set? And if it is, I can opt out of it. And I think this is going to be the model for a lot of the companies going forward, is making sure when they build their data sets that they do respect kind of the rights of users as well. Does that get to your question? Okay.
Yes, but I just wonder if, so for instance, if someone won this battle in court, is it possible that he can just forbid anyone to reshare? For instance, stable diffusion is already everywhere, yes? So how this could end up? Like,
I mean, this is where we can have a beer and go through lots of different scenarios, because it gets very messy. Because also you have many different judicial systems that can go on, right? So one thing could happen in Europe, another thing could happen in the US. You have individual artists that could do it. You have Getty that's doing it. The GitHub Copilot currently has a class action lawsuit against that, because some of the code that they have there, it's regurgitating the training code, and that training code was code that was not like GPL code that was not supposed to be used for this purpose. So I think, yeah, this next year we're going to see that, figured out as we do this, and we're already seeing lawsuits against Stable Diffusion. There's lawsuits against people like GitHub and Microsoft and OpenAI for the code generation as well. And yeah, there'll be more as we figure this out. So yeah, it's going to be messy. But this is also, if you're working for a company, it's very important thinking forward, right? So to avoid this, making sure going forward that you are aware of this and taking care of this.
Another question, Rajiv. So there's a lot of work now, especially on the big companies and governments and also the European Union jurisdictions about responsible AI. And how do you tackle it? I mean, the explainability, robustness, and fairness in your roadmap for the next years in Hugging Face. Are you going to spend and push it forward?
I mean, so yeah, Hugging Face has a lot of people focused on responsible AI in kind of many different ways. So for example, Carlos is on the Hugging Face team, and he's been focused on licensing, like being put forth something called Rail, which is a responsible AI license, which, yes, you can use the model, but we also want to make sure that you're only using it for responsible uses. Like, we don't want you to use the model for harassing people, which is traditionally different than the old-fashioned Apache licenses. So that's one way we're doing the responsible AI. Some of it is these projects like Bitcode, where we're going to lead by using responsible AI practices. There's also, we have folks on the team building the core infrastructure elements, things like model cards, data set measurements. All of these are like core elements that data scientists, machine learning people need to take into account for building responsible AI. And then we even have an ethicist that helps us think about what are the impacts of our work, like what's happening now in the world as we have these pieces. So if you follow Hugging AI on Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll see that it's an issue that we're very involved in kind of many different dimensions along that way. So yeah, and actually doing stuff, not just talking about it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, great presentation. So that was impressive, and your company, you do a lot, so that's also impressive, right? Guys, as we have Rajiv here, if you have questions, please speak or write it down.
Yeah.
I have another one. So, and you told me that because you, so one use case, you come with these fintech companies of model tailoring based on the needs. Which other sectors you believe there is a opportunity to work, and you have something like additional space that you can train models if you sign like contracts with companies to help them with some cloud environments. Can you tell a little bit more about this?
Yeah. So one thing is, this kind of revolution with transformers and AI, I think it really affects pretty much, almost any company that has some type of data it's working with. Often what I find is like companies that are in the financial sector, the insurance sector, they might be the most sophisticated already and using data science and machine learning. They already have teams. So it's a little bit easier to kind of get started with them. But even if you're in, manufacturing or marketing, these same types of technologies that help us, understand the text of what people are talking about, for example, can be used for whether it's a churn model, a customer service, bot like that, right? Imaging for document AI. If you're in a biomedical company and you need to understand what's the images, or you're working for a health insurer and you want to be able to analyze the claims and the medical reports that come out like that. And so the things that Hugging Face does is it hosts the models, It hosts the data sets. It holds the spaces. Like, we're giving people the infrastructure so they can solve these in kind of a very easy way, in a free way. If you're a company, we do help with services, but then also we host endpoints, or what we call inference endpoints, where if you have a model, you can go ahead and get predictions and have Hugging Face take advantage of, or do all the MLOps hosting. So you literally just a couple of clicks and you can get a model into production that way as well. So that's been a growing part of Hugging Face, especially for smaller companies that don't have the time to set up an MLOps team. We can kind of quickly get them up in speed that way as well. Oh, yes. Thank you. That's the Rail licenses. Yes. Any of these topics, feel free to contact me, outside of this too. You have my name. You can find me easily on LinkedIn as well. So don't feel like this is the end of the conversation if you didn't say anything.
How do you find this from the business opportunities, this split? Because we are like three different words: NLP, textual models, images, and speech recognition, text to speech. What is? I have my own view on it. What is your vision according to the business opportunities in each sector?
Yeah, I mean, so I think I'll tell you what I'm seeing right now. It's hard to fit the opportunities, but the speech to text is one where I've seen a lot of interest recently because OpenAI released its Whisper model, which for English I know does really well and is undercutting a lot of the existing transcription services with the level of quality it is. NLP is an area where transformers and all of this stuff has dominated for the last several years. Like, any NLP conference nowadays, like, everybody there knows transformers. Everybody there is using them as well. Kind of the image space is a newer space for Hugging Face and transformers, where we're starting to make headway there by adding more of the libraries in. We have, I can keep forgetting, is it Russ or Ross? From the TIM libraries has joined Hugging Face and kind of bringing those into as well. So I think, computer vision is one where we're growing as well. I just feel like the computer vision field, it grew rapidly like 5 or 6 years ago, but it's pretty kind of stagnant till then. So maybe some of this other generative stuff will kind of push it along and find some new useful use cases. What are you thinking? What is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thought is like that textual documents are the most commonly.
Yeah.
And my personal split is like 4 for textual, 2 for computer vision, and 1 for speech recognition. But I might be wrong with these proportions.
I think it's fair in terms of the importance and the value that you often get by spending time in the enterprise with them. So I think that makes sense. I mean, the thing I've seen for the audio is simply just because there's that new Whisper tool has really kind of rejuvenated interest in that area. Are you guys familiar with Whisper? I have no idea how well it works for Polish.
I haven't heard about that, but maybe some of other folks had. I don't know, Piotr, maybe that's your field. Okay.
Piotr might be on daily with with his colleagues from Palo Alto.
Yeah,
so he
no, the Whisper has been a game changer in terms of how the quality that it has, and then how quick it is too. So.
And how close are you with with OpenAI? The teams Elon Musk sponsored, Bright Minds. How do you have some conferences, handshake, the developers sharing with OpenAI's? Guys.
So like day to day, I don't do anything with OpenAI. Right? They have a very different piece like that. I do know like some of the folks that work with our large language models that are kind of doing the cutting edge research on that do talk to some of the OpenAI folks there informally like that. But we have no kind of formal connection there. I think when we get to like the Chat GPTs and the Blooms and the Palms and Chinchillas and all other models, Anthropic's models, like this world of the really highfalutin large language models. I think there's a small community there that often shares research and different techniques for how to do that stuff there, and that OpenAI's researchers, loosely participate in that. So yeah, has the ChatGPT thing been a big thing there for you guys?
It is. It even speaks Polish. So.
Oh, it does. Okay, it does. All right, there you go.
As in other languages, it can write you some poems. So yeah.
Yeah, I had to do songs for me and different singers and stuff like that, and it worked well. Impressed my teenager.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's very, very interesting. We had I was on a talk, and I'm not sure if you noticed, there are the same pricing of OpenAI and via OpenAI service and on Azure. So there were some handshake between Microsoft and Satya Nadella, yes, and Elon Musk. All right. Do you think that you would work in such big tech and somehow acquire you? Because I know your philosophy. Yes, I remember that you were in. It was like probably in the Vancouver this conference, New Rips, 2 years ago, and it was official announcement, $100 million of another series of funding for Hugging Faces. Do you have a feeling that some part of the company can be acquired, like some big tech?
So these are discussions that are way above me. I'm sure if somebody came along with enough money, the founders would like everybody has a price, but the mission really has been to focus on the open source and make sure that the open source and democratization of good machine learning. And I believe the founders are sincere in doing that, whether it's a cloud provider, whether it's a hardware stack, whether it's a model, is really being agnostic and helping people kind of choose between all of those to help pick kind of the best solution or be able to, choose what's best for their needs. And so I feel like we're going to stay on this mission of focusing on kind of open source and not necessarily, become proprietary or wedded with one of these overnight. It just seems counter against what's been going on the last couple of years.
I have a slightly different question. Maybe not so about corporations, but rather about machine learning models in different domain. You have great overview of things that happen in the field. So, for example, life sciences, things like, I don't know, drug discovery. How do you feel? Would that field will be also revolutionized by machine learning?
So, the drug discovery is one where there's been a lot of work in terms of machine learning, and it seems to, I'm not an expert in that area, but I mean, it seems that the folks there, both computer scientists and the people that were already there, are both adopting these technologies and using them well for drug discovery. I also know, just dealing with medical literature, diseases, publications, medical records, like a new model for Microsoft was just released the other day, like a bio GPT model around that. So, as the literature of the medical profession increases, building domain specific models there makes sense. And you see kind of people doing that. I think BioBert has been around for a few years like that. So, we'll see it there, but I'm seeing it other kind of very niche-y, smaller kind of niche fields too, where companies are, know that the performance with the BERT, but they're like, hey, we really want to spend time training the model for our specific, our specific corpus and our specific language, like that. So yeah, I mean, I think you're just going to see this stuff keep going across many, many domains and, like that.
Yeah. So, but your answer is about using NLP in the domain, right? So does it mean that NLP is enough to revolutionize like different
oh yeah
domains?
Oh yeah, this gets me to the speculation. It's a little hard like that. I don't know. I mean,
just an open question. No worries. So yeah.
We can stop recording, Marcin, I believe.
Yeah. In my experience, right, it's often best when it augments a person and kind of works hand in hand. And that's often really what happens in reality. I think a lot of times, right, this was the hype of like the Andrew Ng and the X-rays and radiologists, right, 5 or 6 years ago, right, that we heard, yeah, right, we don't need radiologists. They'll all be gone, right? Our image will work that good. And I think sometimes we overplay how well these things actually go compared to kind of humans. And it's better to just, recognize the strengths and weaknesses of each approach.
In medicine, there should be human in the loop, because
Yeah.
it would be irresponsible AI.
Yeah, so
I agree.
maybe, okay, do we have any more questions? If like a last chance, and then we go off the record. Okay. So if not, thanks, Raj, for your presentation. I will now switch account to stop the recording, and we can stay still for a moment.
Yeah.